So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to a grey day over Lake EVENDIM. This is one of several battles that were sent to me by Hunter Wayward, and big thank you to him because he sent me quite a lot of battles all in one go, which we will be seeing sort of interspersed over the coming weeks and maybe even months. He did send me a lot of them after all, and I don't know quite when 0.96 will be defunct and 0.97 will come in. But this is the first one that I'm going to show, mainly because I believe I've only shown Lake EVENDIM once before, and it is quite an interesting map. It obviously has the ring, which goes all the way around, a couple of river crossings, and then obviously the central island here. I've never seen this central island actually occupied, both in battles that I've played and in the one that I showed as well, which I also played in. This island was not occupied, mainly because I think it can be a little bit awkward for one sort of player to occupy this island and then leave essentially all of their allies in the dirt while they sort of get ground down, and then they have to try and hope that this sort of final stand is enough, which is often why you see the central island maybe ignored a little bit. Maybe this is more for a scenario on this map than anything else, but I believe what we will see is some very thick fighting over here on this main front line between the good and evil factions, and then there will be of course flanking forces from both sides, I imagine, comprising mainly of cavalry and then a few infantry units following in over on this side of the river, because of course whoever wins this engagement can then go on to sort of hit the other team in the back, as it were, and start putting pressure on both sides, which is always going to be a good thing to do. But as I said, I believe it's good versus evil, so we'll start off with the player who sent me the replay, and that is Hunter Wayward, and he seems to be a fan of Rude Hour, because a lot of the replays he sent me had Rude Hour in the title, and he is going to be playing as them here. And I approve of that, because I also like Rude Hour. They've got a lot going for them, a lot of nice savage offensive units, particularly with their javelins, and a lot of their infantry is not half bad either. Often melee skill and defensive skill is what lets them down a little bit, but you can go heavy enough in terms of numbers to offset that slightly. So let's go ahead and see what it is he has brought. He's got a couple of units here of the Rude Hour marks, which again, their gimmick is that they have a lot of ammunition. They are, after all, have got a lot of quivers on them. Overall, you know, you can pretty much expect them to be like any other lower to low mid-tier archer in terms of the performance that they're going to give you. They don't have a huge amount of manpower in their unit compared to some of the more numerous archers of this tier, but like I say, if the enemy doesn't completely eliminate the unit quickly, they will essentially be firing in whatever shape they're in until the late game, which, you know, range pressure in the late game can be the difference between victory and defeat, so there is a nice little niche for the Rude Hour marksman, but they are by no means a high quality archer, even in spite of all their ammunition. We also have some Rude Hour clansmen over here, which as far as spearmen go, they have decent offensive stats, although that is offset again by the spear malice. The main thing with these guys is that they do have a very nice shield value with their large shields, and of course with their armor upgrade they can make a very good tar pit for ranged fire as well. Good for holding the line with all of their mass, and obviously I don't quite know where they're going to be going. They might be heading towards the front line, or they might turn around and start heading across the river to potentially intercept any enemy cavalry that starts marauding around in that direction. One of my favourite units for Rude Hour is the Hranodine Pikemen, because they are so efficient in melee. They offer about the same level of sort of melee prowess, as it were, as the Uruk-hai Pikemen, but they're actually cheaper, and in addition to that they do have the shield value. I believe their armor values are lower, however, and also you can only have 2 before the cost increases, so it's very much a situation like you have with the Guards of Osgiliath, in that they are actually a very high quality unit, but the red limit, where obviously the unit gets far more expensive when you have 2, you know, to get that third one you have to put in a lot more money than you would like to. That is really the limit on the Hranodine Pikemen. You can't blanket your line with them, and if you want to have a very heavy pike presence, you will have to dip into the slightly less impressive Dunman Pikemen. But even so, looks like he's gone for a couple of those with more Rude Hour clansmen in there as well. He's also got a lot of Rude Hour swordsmen, which again, nothing too special. But they do actually have a fair amount of manpower in the unit, quite similar to a lot of the Orc infantry units. And they may not be anything too special, but they will get the job done. You know, they will sort of give you the numbers, the mass on the front line that you need, and they won't go down without a fight, which is very much the Rude Hour mentality with their lower melee defense. We also have some Hranodine Berserkers back here, which again, they only have 2 volleys on the axes that they throw, but as soon as that happens they get into melee, and then they are a very impressive shock infantry unit as well, around the same sort of tier in melee as you would expect to see from something like the Westmark Marshals. Yeah, but the addition of that sort of ranged pressure as well is obviously fits in very well with Rude Hour, and obviously those hexagonal shields also means that they do have a pretty nice shield value to sort of counteract any sort of range damage. Over here we do have some Trollshrill axe throws, which unlike the Hranodine Berserkers are not that great in melee, and also very vulnerable to range fire, but they can hide, and obviously when they do throw those axes, for the time being anyway, they are still AP. Ettenmore's Troll Hunters, which overall, again, one of the most useful units in the Rudar line. They will be even more useful in 0.97 when their spears gain even more sort of attack value versus cavalry, and obviously their javelins, even then, and now, are very, very effective indeed. But yeah, very much a centre point for the Rudar line, because they are very, very efficient. They're very heavily armoured, good at sort of absorbing pressure. They're decent in melee as well, but again, that Spear Malice doesn't help them with regards to their killing power in melee. We've got some Reforged javelins, which, unlike the Ettenmore's Troll Hunters, do have a lot of killing power in melee, because they are multiple HP shock troops in melee. But even so, there is a limit to what they can accomplish. They may be able to go toe-to-toe with an awful lot of units, but melee defense, like I say again, is one of the main drawbacks to being Rudawa, and that is certainly the case with a lot of their AP units like that. Of a similar tier anyway, Reforged javelins are expensive. Rudar Clansmen, then we have some Dunman Hunters at the back again, very cheap archers, which Rudawa, generally speaking, going to be relying on to do their skirmish fighting. But the one exception to that is going to be the Franadine Rangers, of course. Rangers you don't want anywhere near a skirmish fight if you can help it. You want to get them into a position where they can shoot right along the enemy lines and get the most out of their body piercing. And then finally, we have the Rudar General, which is of course going to be the Franadine Nobles. Knights, of course, of all stripes are going to be very, very effective. Franadine Nobles, what sets them apart, of course, is they have slightly less armour and melee defense, but they trade that in for having AP in melee, which can really help them against the right targets. Heavily armoured knights, they won't want to get into melee with the Franadine Nobles, because that AP makes a big difference. You only have to look at something like the Heavy Goblin Spears to see what a big difference AP can make against the right target. So, moving on to his nearest ally, we have Bloodbath McGrath playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, and he's got some Heavy Goblin Infantry over here. Obviously, the fodder for the front line. Obviously, Goblin Infantry is free and is technically the fodder unit, but the Heavy Goblin Infantry, they don't exactly inspire too much confidence with how good they are in melee. But even so, I do feel as though they do their job well enough. I mean, you don't expect them to set the world on fire with how good they are in melee. We've also got some Heavy Goblin Halberds over here, which again, the Phalanx, the AP, going to be useful, but if their Phalanx is breached, they're going to be in a lot of trouble, and if they come toe-to-toe with another Halberdier or a Pike unit, they are going to be in trouble as well, but they are cheap for a unit that has the Phalanx formation. We also have a lot of Heavy Goblin Spears, which you would very much expect. They are unlike the Halberds and the infantry, they are pretty good all round. The AP makes a big difference to their damage output, as I've said before. They're pretty good on the defense, they've got a big shield value, and overall their stats are pretty damn good. Obviously against lightly armoured units, the Spear Malice will still come into effect, however, in a big way. Then we have some Black Uruks again, the sort of exception on the Misty Mountains line. Most of the Heavy Goblins tend to be either low damage or sort of low skill. But the Black Uruks are an exception to that. They are a two-handed sword unit, so they do have decent skill. Obviously, they will still struggle against human swordmasters and especially elven swordmasters, but they will at least put up a fight where the Heavy Goblins would get ripped to pieces. Over here we've obviously got some Heavy Goblin Archers and some Crossmen, so some range pressure. The crossbows, particularly for the Misty Mountains, very, very useful, because if you can get them into the right position, the stopping power can be incredibly helpful. But anyone who's facing the Misty Mountains will know to start firing down on the crossbows as much as they possibly can. We've got some Warg Skirmishers and some Bulk Champions. I would kind of expect them to follow Rudawa around this way, because charging right up the gut is going to be very, very risky, because it's a very narrow battlefield, generally speaking. Lake Evendim, obviously the big lake in the middle, dominates the geography of the area. We obviously have some Drake Broodlings as well, which could be very, very useful for breaking through lines. You very rarely see the Drake Broodlings meet their full potential, because a lot of the time people will start focusing them down quite quickly, because they can be quite a scary sight when they come sprinting towards your lines and start ripping their way through it. And then obviously we have some Trolls as well. Snow Trolls, good in melee, and then the Troll Drummers, the Cave Troll Drummers rather, will keep those Goblins in line for as much as possible, for as long as possible I should say. Then we have Tangerine, who's going to be playing as Isengard. He too has some Warg Riders and the mighty Champions of the White Hand, so huge anti-cavalry presence here from the evil team, as you might expect. And I would certainly expect them to go around the other side with the Misty Mountains Wargs and the Rudar Cavalry as well. He's got another unit of Warg Riders even, some Nazkai. Excuse me. That is the Harad army, which we'll get onto in just a moment. But his main line, let's see what he's got in terms of infantry. He has some Guards of Orthanc, which of course elite spears, very, very durable. Dunlending Clansmen, much less durable, but also much less expensive. We've got some Uruk-hai Archers, which, considering Isengard are going to be one of the factions which are going to be fighting on the front line, they are going to need some sort of range pressure, and a cheap archer like this will do the job fine. We have the old model for the Trolls of the White Hand back, but while they may not look as impressive in 0.96.1, they are still very, very strong in melee. Uruk-hai infantry and pikemen, obviously the classic Isengard front line, backed up by berserkers and even some Dunlanding berserkers as well. Good to see them, an underutilised unit. Some of the Uruk-hai infantry actually has the armour upgrade as well, so that's also good to see. So a fairly well-rounded army from Isengard, maybe a little bit more focus on mounted units than I was expecting, but it might be that they want to sort of take the other side and start hitting the enemy in the back as quickly as possible. We shall see. And then the final army for the evil side, we have Forever Alone, who's going to be playing as Harad. He has got some Black Serpent bodyguards over here, and the rest of his army, I think, is over here at the front. Indeed it is. So he's got some Champions of Nafrat as well. Very, very powerful in terms of the multiple HP shock troops. They are certainly one of the strongest. We have the Muhad warriors as well. Forming up the main line, they are more numerous than the Black Serpents. The Serpent Guard, the dismounted Serpent Guard. But obviously, you know, the Serpent Guard do at least have pretty good armour and skill values. The Muhad warriors certainly don't have good armour values, but they do have a pretty good shield value. So all is not lost as long as they keep pointing towards the enemy. We have the Mumakil. Harad's fate could rest on how well Forever Alone is able to utilise these Mumakil. If he charges them into the jaws of the good team, then the evil team might well start to struggle here. They might start to be turned back. But if he sort of uses them wisely, sort of waits for the opportune moment, they could be the match winners. Some Southron archers here as well. No Haradrim archers by the looks of things, just the Southrons. We've got some Trollmen. We also have a lot of Haradrim spearmen. Obviously this is the concession you have to make, really. When you bring the Mumakil, you have to bring a lot of these low tier units to sort of make up for the fact that Mumakil is so expensive. And we have the Trollmen of Harad over on this flank as well. So that is the evil team. Looks as though they're going for a little bit more focus around mounted units, maybe sort of cycling around the other side of the lake to try and win that fight over there. We'll see how that goes for them. Meanwhile, let's go on to the good team. Starting off with Mighty Eskimo 6 here on the front line. We do have some Cardolan troops. We have a couple of units of Miniscarithlin sharpshooters, which again, you know, crossbows, very, very good stopping power. If they get into the right position, they could wreak havoc for the evil team. However, another thing about them is, of course, they are mace men in melee, so that AP could come in very, very handy indeed. And then we have the classic Cardolan sort of force here, made up of a lot of pikemen, the Greenwatch Garrison footmen, which are cheap pikes but very, very efficient. As long as they don't get hit by too much range fire, they should do a decent job of holding the line, especially when they're being backed up by other factions. And then obviously in the centre, the Wardens of Tir Gorthad, which will buff the morale of nearby units, which Cardolan absolutely need. In addition to that, we do have some more infantry units behind. We have some Greenwatch Garrison spearmen and some Miniscarithlin swordsmen, which again, nothing too special. The Miniscarithlin swordsmen, very much the sort of standard Western Kingdoms of Men line infantry unit. The Greenwatch Garrison spearmen are awful in melee, but they are actually a pretty good tar pit for dealing with arrows. Dunedain captains with the armour upgrade, obviously, you know, multiple HP, two-handed sword unit, a lot of skill. They're going to be able to carve their way through the lower tier units of the opposition quite easily. But the Dunedain captains will also probably be one of those units to the evil team will try to focus down. We've got spearmen, more spearmen, a lot of spears. You know, spears to try and deal with potentially frontal cavalry, or maybe to try and bog down the Mumakil, but keeping the Mumakil bogged down is very, very difficult with their mass. The Minotaur Romen Guardians, of course, again, halberdiers in melee, crossbows at range, another very, very good crossbow hybrid with the armour upgrade as well. And some cavalry, some Merc cavalry. I mean, they're definitely going to have to be used defensively if, like, sort of the Mumakil or enemy cavalry units start to sort of slip around. That is what I believe they are here for. I can't imagine that they will be used aggressively, because they'll be ripped to pieces, especially by Isengard on the front line. They're very good at dealing with cavalry. Over here, however, we have Dol Amroth. Inarius has got some Tirith Air Marksmen up here on the hill. This is obviously a very nice position to take up, but the interesting thing is, the only way up the hill is from this side of it, where the where the evil team are coming from. So it's not as if he can just sort of reinforce from this side. So he does need to be a little bit careful. But provided Cardolan hold and provided Dol Amroth get into a position to reinforce them quickly enough, Cardolan and Dol Amroth should be able to hold for a decent amount of time. It does look as though, you know, obviously the good team, what they do with regards to sending units to the other side of the river will also come into play. We've got some Tarnostian Guard, a lot more pikes as well, a lot of Doran Erno pikemen, so they're definitely going for the pike mentality here. We'll see if that pays off for them. Tarnostian Guard, some Talon Knights, which the Talon Knights are multiple HP, but honestly in 0.96.1 this is probably one of the most underwhelming multiple HP units in the game. They will still do a decent job against the basic units of the evil side, but as soon as the going gets rough against some of the elites that they have, especially against something like the Champions of Nafrat, the Talon Knights will probably start to fold pretty quickly. A unit which I do rate, however, is the Black Swan Vanguard. The AP could come in extremely useful against the Isengard front line. Less so against the Harajam power with all those Muhad warriors and Harajam spearmen. More Black Swans, more Talon Knights, and obviously the Haven Guard, which is where Imrahil is. No Dol Amroth cavalry by the looks of things, which is interesting. That's one of the factions you would expect to bring some cav. Meanwhile, another Kingdom of Men, we have Trebor, who is going to be playing as Arthedain. A couple of units of dismounted knights for Numinous, a lot of Arthedain marksmen and Evendim archers. Obviously Arthedain, very capable of bringing a heavy bow corps. We have some Fornoster Rain Defenders, which is a rare pick actually in 0.96.1, purely because the Dunedain Peacekeepers have got the skill. Fornoster Rain Defenders are a little bit redundant in 0.96.1 really, but they will be the primary spear in 0.97 when the Peacekeepers are transformed into Axe Infantry. Even more pikes as well, so certainly the Kingdoms of Men here going heavy into the pikes. We have some Arthedain Men-at-Arms as well, a couple of units of them, and obviously some Fornoster Rain Knights as well. Good human Swordmaster unit, and then finally, the final good faction, we have Dale, played by Baconfish 302. He has got a very compacted line. That's a huge amount of Lake Town units in there. So Lake Town spears, pikes, and I would imagine that there is probably some Lake Town archers here and there as well. He's got some Dalian Royal Guard and the Blackshot Dragon Slayers. He's got some Dalian Marksmen, Bardian Marksmen, a huge amount of archers actually. So again, as you would expect from Dale, bringing the skirmish power. Swordmasters of Karnan, Girian's Paladins, and then finally a unit of Dalian Cavalry, but they are pointing this way, which suggests to me that the Kingdoms of Men are all going to sort of fight in this area over here and sort of try and lock things down, which does mean they're going to be sort of surrendering this avenue of attack to the evil team, but if they can sort of bank up on this choke point, get some people up here on this hilltop, this is a pretty nasty choke point if that is what they intend to do, but we shall see. I mean, this is a 21k battle, so it is going to go by pretty quickly actually for a 4v4 on a more choke pointy map like Lake Evendim. So without further ado, let's begin. That was a fairly long introduction to the armies here, but I felt like it's kind of necessary considering that there are very different factions in play here, and it does look as though we do have Harad advancing forward very quickly with his Mumakil by the looks of things there as you see them poking through the trees. I would worry if he brings his Mumakil in too aggressively. This is exactly the sort of thing which Cardinal are going to like. We see here Thieves of Tharbad revealing themselves, Wathlo Trackers revealing themselves, Dunedain Rangers. Cardinal, I think, are going to try and sort of form up a front line here. I mean, they will need to form up a front line here if they want to make use of that hill there. I don't believe Cardinal or Dol Amroth have got access to any sort of Javelin unit, which is obviously the most efficient way of dealing with Mumakil. There are those Nimrodel Rangers, which have revealed themselves from the hill as well. However, Cardinal's crossbows should still do a decent amount of damage, as we can see here the rain really starting to come down, a storm over the lake. The Mumakil, a little bit indecisive here, but they do have that ranged attack, of course, which does mean that they can sort of put some pressure on from afar. Kill off a few of those Greenwatch Garrison Spearmen as well, very, very vulnerable to ranged attacks. Harad forming up the front line, the Harajam Spearmen naturally going to be the very disposable front line. They're going to be going in first, trying to absorb any shock damage that the forces of good, the Kingdoms of Men, will be trying to inflict on those front line. You definitely don't want the Trollmen to be taking too many unnecessary casualties early on. But the Muhad Warriors are over here. I think they're just going to be sort of forming up, they're sort of getting ready. Getting ready for the advance, because they are going to need the support of their allies. You can see here Isengard are moving forward. The bulk of the Misty Mountains forces are also probably going to be moving forwards. Let's see what's going on over here. Dol Amroth do have some cavalry that was hidden. Sneaky, sneaky, sneaky. We have the Mercenary Crossbowmen, we have the Swan Knights, and we have the Haven Knights. So I was wondering, Dol Amroth's army did look a little small, but I thought it was hidden infantry. Arthedain Sergeants and the Grey Company. The Grey Company could be a pretty good counter to any of those wargs. So this is a pretty nasty cav force actually, but it is fairly micro-intensive. They will live and die based on how well they micro the Grey Company and Mercenary Crossbows if it comes down to a straight fight between themselves and the very heavy anti-cavalry presence of the Misty Mountains and Isengard, backed up by those Franodine nobles as well. There's always the Black Serpents to consider as well. That's very interesting chanting there from the Trollmen of Harad. You can see here the huge volume of Muhad warriors now starting to move forward, which again, good to see. Good to see a unit which you don't see a huge amount of. Obviously we have the Southron Archers out in front, still a little bit of a lull in proceedings as the Gwathlo Trackers start to get up high. The Gwathlo Trackers are not exactly the best unit for a skirmish fight. They're definitely, I've called them ghetto rangers in the past because, you know, they're kind of like rangers in how they perform in a skirmish fight. The good thing about them is that they are cheap, but, you know, they're not great in a skirmish fight because they don't have a huge amount of manpower to them. And obviously they don't have the body piercing that rangers have either. Still, these Mumakil are just sort of hanging out right next to the defensive line of the good team here. I don't quite know what they're going to do. I mean, they probably shouldn't just charge in yet. The Mumakil definitely need to sort of keep their cool. The Mumakil are such a potentially devastating weapon that you can use. But also the Mumakil are just sort of hanging out here. I mean, if Cardland get a unit of crossbows in position, they could start putting some pressure on the Mumakil, maybe kill off a unit model very quickly, which obviously for Mumakil is a very big deal. Based on how this sort of battle is sort of shaping up, I can sort of tell already that we're going to have a very savage fight on the front line, a lot of death very, very quickly. Purely because, the length of the battle is not hugely long, considering that there are 4 players on each team, and that it is quite a choke pointy engagement as well. Certainly, I would say the Kingdoms of Men have got the nicer defensive position with these pieces of raised terrain that they can use to their advantage. However, I would also say that certainly the most stopping power in melee comes from this side. There's a lot of pikes going on for the defensive force over here, which means their defense is very much going to be dependent on whether or not the pikes can keep their shape. We shall see. Meanwhile, interestingly enough, you can see here the Warg Riders of Tangerine sort of starting to move up. Maybe the evil team are going to be the ones defensively sort of setting up their Wargs and their Cav over here, sort of try and prevent the red team from using their own shock cavalry, because it does look as though Rudauer is going to be sending across the entirety of their forces to head towards the front line. Meanwhile, Cardland inching their way forwards. Certainly the calm before the storm here. Dunedain Rangers getting on top of the hill as well, and this is really going to be one of the things the evil team needs to try and address quite quickly. The fact that they do have these Dunedain Rangers, they have the Nimrodel Rangers hanging around somewhere as well, and they can get some really nice crossfire into the middle of this valley over here, which could be potentially devastating. Interesting sort of setup so far. Lake Town pikemen heading out in front, then the Greenwatch Garrison footmen, so there are banks of pikemen here. There's also the Bardian marksmen just in behind. There's Arthedain pikemen. The Dora and Ernil pikemen are also out in force up on that hill over there, so it's a lot of pikes to try and smash their way through. They do have trolls, of course. It's going to come down to mass, I think. The evil side are going to need to be very aggressive to try and buckle these pike lines quickly. If they allow the pikes to sort of get set and start being efficient, then the Kingdoms of Men are going to look very, very healthy as this battle goes along, I think. Bardian marksmen are starting to come forward, obviously terrific unit in a skirmish fight, especially with the armour upgrade like they have here, their heavy lamellar armour and that shield value. In addition to pretty decent damage values themselves, they are a fairly expensive archer unit, one of the few heavily armoured expensive archers, I would say, which is worth it in 0.96.1 alongside the Abrazani Nadubawi from Umbar. Well, these Mumakil, not quite sure what they want to do so far. Maybe that both sides are just sort of waiting to get set. Obviously Rudauer still very much on their way over here. And in fact, I'd say that, yeah, the archers, if they're not engaging each other with their archers yet, that suggests to me that the gentleman's agreement is that they're waiting until all of the forces get into position. So I think maybe it's about time we made things go by a little bit quicker. And so, after a little mini cut there, the trollmen are chanting, and the archers are starting to open up on one another. Now the Bardian marksmen out here in front, they are very, very good in a skirmish fight, but that's a lot of archers across the way from them. There's a lot of Uruk-hai archers, a lot of Southron archers. You can see the fire arrows also coming in. And also, any arrows which miss the Bardian marksman are going to go right into that phalanx. Now fortunately, Baconfish, again, he's played enough of the game to know what he's doing. The Lake Town spearmen are the ones out in front, so they will be the ones absorbing the fire, those shields. The Lake Town pikemen will not be taking as much damage. The Mumakil also firing away, obviously. A lot of people tend to forget that the Mumakil have got that ranged attack. Most people just see them as a bludgeon. But utilising all the Mumakil's ammo before charging them in is, technically speaking, the way to try and get the most amount of kills with them. Meanwhile, over here you can see the Dalian marksmen up on the hill, Arthedain marksmen as well. I still say, actually, that the best thing for the evil team to do would be to be aggressive, I think. You know, there's a huge archer presence here from the Kingdoms of Men. Most of their defensive line is made up of pikes, and that is a pretty impressive defensive line, I must say. Sort of from Dol Amroth blending into Dale. But it's honestly, when you look at the units that it includes, it's honestly not terribly scary. And certainly I think that the evil team have got the right tools to start dealing with it very, very quickly. The only problem now is, though, Cardland might be moving their own forces, Mighty Eskimo getting a few units into position. If he's allowed to do that, if they sort of manage to bulk up their units too much, they won't do that just yet, of course, because they're under range fire. But if they are allowed to do that, then they won't be able to push their way through quite so easily. Pushing your way through a single pike unit is fine, but as soon as they're banked up sort of 3 layers deep, it's a lot more difficult. Well, if we have a look at what the casualties are looking like, I'm not sure why the Trollmen have put themselves in harm's way, to be honest with you. You really need to be saving them for the late game. They're so effective. The AP, the damage values on them can be so useful. But you can see here that the skirmishers from the evil team, thus far, they're doing okay for themselves. Overall, the evil team can afford to lose more of their skirmishers than the good team. You can see actually that the Kingdoms of Men here are utilising a huge amount, and even their Dunedain Rangers, that there I think is a big mistake. You know, the Dunedain Rangers are the sort of thing you should only be using when you're sure you're going to be able to get a huge amount of value off them, although I say that the heavy Goblin crossbows are right here in harm's way as well from Bloodbath McGrath. I mean, this has very much got the feeling of a sort of Napoleonic era battle at the moment, where people are sort of forming up lines and shooting one another. Urukai archers sort of routing. But yeah, the heavy Goblin crossbows, this is definitely not the sort of place where they want to be. And I take it back, you know, if the Dunedain Rangers are able to kill off this unit quickly enough, it will be a worthwhile use of their ammunition, because obviously the crossbow is definitely one of the things which the evil team can bring and do a lot of damage with, the heavy Goblins and the Urukai. Well, Rudar's still sort of making their way to the front here. I mean, I can only imagine that when the melee engagement begins, it will be hideous and brutal. Which, to my mind, suits the evil team a little bit more. But again, this is a very questionable choice from Bloodbath McGrath. This, I mean, sending forward your javelins and your crossbows to be butchered en masse by this very, very devastating defensive archer line from the Kingdoms of Men is a big mistake. I think it's unnecessary. We've seen in the past how efficient the Snaga skirmishers can be, but they're not going to achieve anything here. You know, they're not going to kill a huge amount of men in a single volley, and that's all they're going to be able to get off if you keep them there. So I'm not really sure what Bloodbath McGrath is thinking there. You can see that the Dunlending Berserkers moving in, Rudar coming in. I mean, there's a lot of infantry here for the evil team, and I'm still of the opinion that they need to get in there. They need to start being aggressive. They need to be the angry orcs and evil men that they are, and start trying to take them apart in melee. Because the skirmish fight is going to go in favour of the Kingdoms of Men, without a doubt. Whereas the melee fight, the Kingdoms of Men are so reliant on those pikes, and I just feel as though the brute force of particularly the Mumakil and the Trolls is going to be too much, and the line is bound to buckle somewhere, and as soon as it does, the evil team should be able to take advantage of that and just pour in and wash over them. But if they continue to play into the hands of the Kingdoms of Men here and continue to make this all about shooting each other with their bows, crossbows and javelins, Kingdoms of Men will take that engagement all day long. Dale and Arthedain in particular, this is the sort of warfare that they are very, very good at. Here we can see the heavy Goblin infantry, but again, if they're going to advance with infantry, they need to do it all at once, in my opinion. Sending forward single units of heavy Goblin infantry is absolutely not the right way to go about this. They could try and force the EVENDIM archers to retreat behind the pike block and those Tarnostian guard. Those Doran Ernil pikemen got shredded, actually, and I imagine that a lot of this damage over here was done by those heavy Goblin crossbows. To give credit to Bloodbath McGrath, you know, all of this damage is almost certainly down to him. But even so, you know, the crossbows were really given what for by all of these archers as well. Just keeping an eye on the minimap up there as well. Oh, this is not good. You can see here that the Mumakil's starting to die off now, and this is the danger of just sort of leaving your Mumakil just hanging around in front of all this range fire. Of course, the Kingdoms of Men, of course they're going to go after the Mumakil. The Mumakil are such a deadly unit, and now finally it looks as though they are going to move forward. Again, in my opinion, this is 5 or even 10 minutes too late. And they're very fortunate, actually, that the Mumakil, I don't think they're running amok. No, they're not. But also, the problem here is Mumakil corpses, they are a physical entity on the battlefield, and they will get in the way of this advance. It is good to see that this attack is now happening, but to have lost a Mumakil before being poked and prodded into action is a real shame. You know, I do try and be a little bit diplomatic with how I criticise people's play, but that was poor. You know, the attackers really should know better. I keep referring to the attackers as, you know, they are the ones that are on the offense here. But now, we do have trollmen on the front line, and they are backed up by a significant amount of manpower. Haradrim spearmen and Muhad warriors as well. The problem they will have, of course, is they are going to take rather direct archer fire from this hill. We'll see how well this goes, but they are they're engaging all along the line, which is absolutely the right thing to do. Harad, the ones taking the initial engagement. Isengard also now moving forward. Everyone needs to move forward now for the attackers for me. They can't afford to let Harad just be here on their own, otherwise this sort of engagement is going to happen more and more. Haradrim spearmen trying to face this very strong phalanx all on their lonesome. As we see down here, the Lake Town units holding the line against the savage Harad attack, and now some Dunlanders also moving in to back them up, those two-headed axes. Cardland now also moving in the reinforcement line. Wherever the line is starting to look a little bit ropey is where they will move in, and the line is looking very ropey up here. This was a section of line where clearly they were not looking as healthy as they were all along the rest of their line, because we've got Trollmen of Harad, Dunlanding clans, and we've got Muhad warriors pushing in. They are routing, to be fair. You know, they delve too greedily and too deeply. But there is now a hole in this line, which the attackers can take real advantage of. You can see Rudar coming forward in huge numbers over on this flank over here. There are a lot of archers and crossbows up on this mountainside, which is perhaps why the blue team here is so eager to come this way to sort of try and shut down those Cardinal crossbows. In fact, I think it's time for a bit of half speed while we sort of take stock of everything that's going on. You can see there are Uruk-hai infantry. They're already shaken, however, which is a testament really to how well I think that the red team have set their skirmishers up. Which obviously, considering the sort of focus of their army, the pikes hold the enemy in place and then they shoot them to death with all their other units, makes a good amount of sense. But time will tell whether the good team are actually going to be able to hold down the front lines. We can see here Uruk-hai infantry now coming into the support of the initial Haradrim advance. The Trollmen, of course, were advancing on both of the flanks, so this is where most of their strength lies. Bardian marksmen in melee. You can see defeat is almost a certainty. A lot of strong units over here. Uruk-hai infantry starting to pressure the flanks, and now this will be the litmus test of how strong the Kingdoms of Men and their defensive line is. Have they brought enough quality infantry to actually hold back this onslaught? Because they were very, you know, they invested very heavily in their skirmishers and their cavalry actually. So we'll see. Here we can see the Uruk-hai pikemen now heading to the front line. Uruk-hai pikes obviously far stronger in terms of their quality than Lake Town pikes. Here in the middle, however, you can see this is clearly where a bit of focus fire is coming down from the defensive skirmishers, because there's really very little of the attackers left at this point. The Lake Town pikemen's defeat still seems certain. They're having to go up against Uruk-hai infantry after all. There's pikes moving in. The Mumakil are now coming forward. Having lost one needlessly, let's see if the Mumakil can redeem themselves. Here come the Fornost terrain defenders. It's a real mess up here, to be fair, and I will say that the Kingdoms of Men have done a very good job of sort of patching over this defensive line. Both Arthedain and Cardlan have got some units right in the way, which is good to see. Miniscarithan sharpshooters still safe to shoot. The Dunedain captains also heading up there to try and hold the line with them. The Miniscarithan spearmen trying to hold the line, but Rudauer is coming in here. I mean, Rudauer is blobbing up pretty hardcore, and they're paying for it pretty dearly because they're sort of face tanking all of these crossbow bolts. We'll see. I mean, the Mumakil are now in behind the lines. I'm not sure how much effectiveness they're actually going to... Well, I'm not sure how many kills they're actually going to be able to get, as they are sort of running around. I mean, there's only two of them now. Did another one of them die? Nope, he's just back here. So the Mumakil are now scattered. Things are very, very chaotic. But over here is where the blue team seem to be making some headway. In fact, some wargs are coming in. This, I think, is maybe a little bit foolhardy because there's still pikes on the front line. If this was just infantry and archers, I would say the Warg Riders could probably try and push their way through here.
Only half the enemy force remains.
But considering there are pikes there, definitely not. The Snow Trolls are coming in, however, and you can see here that in conjunction with all of these heavy goblin units, they are pressuring both flanks quite nicely here, the red team. And we'll see if the... Again, I'm not really sure if the red team have the... You can see here the Drake Broodlings are in behind the lines as well, starting to feast on some of these Black Swan Vanguard. But I'm not sure if they have enough defensive quality in terms of their infantry here, the red team, to sort of keep holding the line. They do have the Girions Paladins coming in, they do have the Talon Knights, but here you can see, oh, that's a very nice, just riding dirty right down this line with that Muma kill there. And there are some Sword Masters of Karnan. Most of those men will get back up, but the disruption that causes is pretty significant. And I think now is the time, honestly. I mean, now you can see over on the other side of the river, all of that cavalry is still just sort of waiting there. The red team need to do something with that, in my opinion. I mean, their defensive lines are still holding, and over here they're winning as well because of the support of those Cardinal and skirmishers up there on the hill. The Demons of the Desert are moving forward, however. Again, it's a very nice position that the Rangers and all of the crossbows have taken up. But you can see now that the defensive lines starting to be breached. The Dunedain captains are going to be defending the crossbows in melee. But, again, chaos is what the blue team want here. The evil factions, generally speaking, will always prefer that. The Mumakil have now died off. And now we can see that the next bank of pikemen coming in, the Arthedain pikemen, really the final block of pikes. And you can see that there isn't really a lot in reserve now. There's a couple of units of pikes. The wargs are sort of just waiting for an opportunity to sort of flood in and start disrupting the back line, get into those skirmishers. Trolls of the White Hand are here. The Greenwatch Garrison Spearmen, which we've seen them in the past perform heroic deeds. But against Trolls of the White Hand, not really ideal. There's a lot of spears and a lot of pikes here, not really high damage units, not the sort of thing which is going to be able to do a lot of damage to the Trolls all that quickly. The Demons of the Desert have got an opportunity here to start throwing their javelins into large, clumped up targets. They are being shot, however, so they do need to start using their ammunition quickly. And there you can see the body piercing on those javelins doing a huge amount of damage there to that block of Cardinal infantry. Meanwhile, we're going to go down to half speed for a second. Well, not because of the Haradrim General's death, but because of what's happening over here. We can see that the cavalry is moving across. And we can see there's some mercenary crossbows over here as well. I think that there is a unit of hidden cav over here. We can't actually see it, but it is in here somewhere, because there is a blue triangle, and there is the Hashari shadows. So I assume what they're going to do is allow all of this cavalry to pass by, head towards the engagement with the cavalry, and then they're going to get the Hashari shadows in from behind, and then that is going to be, again, mounted rangers. That's going to be very nice indeed. There's the Bolgs champions. Again, it's going to be interesting to see who wins that cav fight, I think. Meanwhile, we can see over here, let's have a look at the percentage of kills. Yeah, I mean, the evil team are ahead so far, and that surprises me a little bit, actually, because, you know, the skirmishers from the red team have been very, very effectively used. But again, I feel as though this is...
The enemy are badly bloodied. They have lost half their men.
As soon as the announcer is done, I feel as though this is down to the fact that they have gone in very hard in terms of their skirmishers and cavalry being their focus. And again, this is just vindicates me, really, in saying that I feel as though that the evil team could have gotten away with attacking sooner, just going right in, being really aggressive from the start, exposing the fact that a lot of this infantry is pikes and spears, not high damage, not going to be able to stand up to sustained pressure of this magnitude. And you can see here that here in the middle, Guards of Orthanc pushing in, disrupting the phalanx of the Arthedain pikemen in the middle, doing a lot of damage there. Granadine Berserkers in here in melee as well, alongside the Uruk-hai pikemen. Arthedain men-at-arms are definitely not going to be the sort of unit which is going to be enough to win that fight. What is going on over here? We have the Bolgs champions. They need to be careful. I mean, the Arthedain sergeants are right here for the taking, really. The Bolgs champions, it would be a very easy engagement for them. You can see here that the Troll Short Axe throwers. What on earth happened to the cav units? Not being used defensively, I guess, being used on the offense. And use see the Dalian cavalry here. Again, the Warg Riders are coming in. I mean, they're far too close to the pikes, in my opinion. I can see what they're trying to do, but if you want to force path your way through, you need to do that quickly, and here they go. There's a lot of pikes here, though. I mean, I think that this unit of Wargs is... Well, he managed to get out of there. The Wargs are now in behind the enemy lines. They are going to be stopped in their tracks by Merc cavalry. Wargs should win that fight, but with the support of pikes, maybe less so. Still a couple of Trolls of the White Hand. The Arthedain men-at-arms finding themselves outmatched on the front line. Horns of Tyr and Gorthad still fighting hard, but at this point they're kind of out of position. It's not really a very neat phalanx they've got going on. What's going on up here? Here we can see the Bolg's champions caught napping, really. And now they're going to be cycle charged by all of this Dol Amroth melee cab. The Bolg's champions obviously very, very good in melee against other cab, but the Haven Knights also very, very effective at that sort of warfare. And the Swan Knights as well, not half bad. The Bolg's champions are just outnumbered here. And you have those Dunman Hunters as well as those Stakes over there, but again, a very, very clear win here for the Kingdom's Men Cavalry, and they may need it because their front line is really starting to struggle.
They have lost half their men.
They need some sort of relief, and I think it has to come from their cavalry at this point because their back lines are being exposed with each passing second. The Warp Riders again pushing their way through, making a nuisance of themselves. The Heavy Goblin Spears pushing in. The defensive line looked neat at the start, but it's now looking very haggard. I mean, there are still sections of it that are standing firm. We can see here the Dalian Marksmen and the Arthedain Pikemen fighting together. Snaga Skirmishers retreating from the front line. The Guards of Orthanc still here. Arthedain Pikemen still clinging on to this defensive line, really. I mean, for all of their hot air and bluster, the evil factions still haven't made a huge amount of progress that they've managed to make stick. I mean, up here on the hillside, maybe a little bit more so, but I feel as though Hunter Wayward, I can see why he did this. I can see why he went in so hard for the Cardland sort of missile position up here. But I don't think it was worth it in the end. Like, he committed so much of his army in a blob, which was the perfect target for Dunedain Rangers and all of these crossbows. And I feel as though he has learnt a very painful lesson today. That blobbing up doesn't really serve you well in that sort of situation. See here the Warns of Tyr and Gorthad now going after the Brandoline Pikemen with the Trolls of the White Hand. I think actually as time is passing, the Kingdoms of Men are actually managing to stabilise this situation. Because again, for all of their aggression, the evil factions here have not really been able to make any sort of advanced stick. I mean, here in the middle, the Guards of Orthanc are now starting to work up the line of all these pikes. Do they have any reinforcements? They need to get these reinforcements in. Again, I think time is of the essence now. You can see here the Drake Broodlings are in here. This is the section of line you would have to say where the evil forces are still doing well for themselves.
We've lost half of our men.
The Drake Broodlings sort of trying to push their way in. But again, these units over here are no pushovers. Stuff like the Blackshot Dragon Slayers, the Haven Guard, the Fornoster Rain Knights. I believe I also saw another unit in there as well that was elite. Maybe not. Anyway, those Drake Broodlings need to be careful because if they stay in and amongst all of those swordsmen, they're going to start taking some real damage. Here you can see some more ammunition being flowed into the front line from the EVENDIM archers. But this is a big move, this. Tangerine, he's been trying to push in with his wargs all this time, but now he's managed to finally breach the back lines with a unit far scarier than standard wargs, the Champions of the White Hand. And we do have some Dalian cavalry over here, and they're really just going to try and get in the way of the Champions of the White Hand, but they won't be able to do that for very long. The Champions of the White Hand will absolutely destroy Dalian cavalry in melee.
Is very much in our favour. Victory will be ours.
It won't even be close. And this could be the thing which tips the fight into the favour of the evil factions here. The Dalian Royal Guard are over here, but they have nothing left in reserve at this point to deal with this. The Black Serpent Bodyguards are also getting in here, and that's even worse in a way because they're multiple HP Lancers. Their charge is absolutely lethal, and they're coming in. Again, the time has come for this cavalry back here to start making some real moves quickly. Again, these Dunman Hunters obviously left behind, sacrificed to the gods. The Warp Riders are over here taking horrendous casualties from the Grey Company. Two units of... Actually, no, that's the same unit of Grey Company, just very stretched out. This cavalry needs to stop messing around with these Dunman Hunters and Trollshire Axos. They are needed badly on the front line. And they're just over here, just sort of, you know, going after targets which are not really all that important in the grand scheme of things. I mean, their front line is collapsing with worrying speed for them. You can see over here, Forodrum Javelins now coming in. Looks like there was a counter-attack down from the hill, trying to get all of their hybrid crossbows into melee over here, Mighty Eskimo. But unfortunately for him, finally Rudauer is able to make them pay for all the death that they caused his army. Hunter Wayward getting those Forodrum Javelins in there, their AP, exactly the sort of thing which is going to be very useful against the upgraded Minotaur Romed Guardians. More infantry coming in. being shot point blank by the marksman as well, and in come the berserkers. Here are the Ettenmoor's troll hunters. So finally, after all the pain they caused, the cardinal crossbows being made to pay in blood. There's still a fairly healthy section of the cardinal front line over here, to be fair, but at this point, now that when their back lines got breached by those champions of the White Hand and the Black Serpent bodyguards, no bueno for the kingdoms of man. And I was worried about their lack of reserve troops. They front loaded their front line a lot, the defenders here, and it worked for a time. They held out for quite a long time, but there was always going to be a section of this rather long choke point engagement where they were going to start flagging eventually, and unfortunately for them, the evil team were ready to take advantage of that.
Like this, we will smash the
EVENDIM archers getting flattened there by the Black Serpent bodyguards. Dismounted Knights of Anubis rolling in, Tirathea marksmen, some walk skirmishers just waiting as well. They may have used all their javelins already actually. The Haven Guard victory still seems certain for them. There are some Mountain Orc berserkers over here also. What is going on over here? This is a real tragedy over here. And again, this comes down I think to Cav micro that isn't quite on point. As you can see here, the Haven Knights and the Swan Knights. Well, there goes the Rudar General. But they engaged in melee with the Thranodine Nobles, which the Haven Knights should still win, but the AP will make it a very bloody engagement with the Haven Knights. But also they engaged right next to Trollshore Axe Throwers, which with those axes being thrown in as well, and these arrows also flowing into this unit, it was never going to go well. Never going to go well. And an engagement which honestly they still should have won, even if it was not, even if I would have suggested getting their cavalry to the front line as quickly as possible. An engagement I think they should have won, and they ended up losing it in the end. Not good. There goes the Cardinal General. I believe it was one of the Dunman Hunters as well that managed to kill him. Wild. And there are the Uruk-hai Berserkers fighting with the Ferocial Javelins. The Cardinal front line starting to fall apart, but here are the champions of the White Hand. In the end, the moment that they breached the line was probably the moment, honestly, that the red team started to lose. The Merc crossbows are coming over here, but far, far too late. All of that cavalry was so far away from the action when it was happening, when they were really needed here. Whether the entire cavalry force was used defensively, or whether it was aggressively pushed as quickly as possible, one of those two things needed to happen. Indecision is a real killer in this game. More often than not, even if you end up losing an engagement sometimes, it can be better to be more decisive. Sort of get in there, get stuck in, and start stretching your opponent, because then they won't be able to focus so much on this frontline engagement. Meanwhile, Blackback Mountain Berserkers going up against Dismounted Knights of Anubis, a real clash of the titans over here. Dismounted Knights of Anubis looking like they might win. I mean, again, the Blackback Berserkers are very high in terms of their damage output, but I think ultimately what will do the Knights of Anubis in is the fact that there will be other units coming for them as well. Still the Cave Troll Drummers in the background there. You can see there is the Dalian General. In what's left of the Blackshot Dragon Slayer, the Haven Guard still standing firm, fighting to the bitter end. Imrahil, King Brand, and the King of Arthenay, all fighting in close proximity of one another. The King of Cardland already dead, of course, but yeah, at this point it's fairly clear that the forces of evil will be victorious this day. And again, just a coordinated assault all at once. You put the pressure on the team that's trying to be more defensive if you do that. If they have not sort of constructed their line as solidly as they could, that's going to be the end of Cardland, I think. But yeah, if you don't construct your line as solidly as you could, and you saw immediately that there were gaps forming with those Muhad warriors able to push through, then they can start to panic. And while they were able to hold on for longer than I thought they were going to for a while there, in the end, the result was perhaps maybe a little bit predictable based on the compositions that were here. Champions of the White Hand obviously proving to be very, very strong, and I feel as though the defenders could have won this. The forces of men. You know, if they constructed their line maybe a little bit more solidly. But I feel as though the competition did make that difficult. I mean, the pikes are a fantastic tool for holding the line, but they do not kill things quickly. And ultimately, if you bring a lot of pikes, you are inviting the enemy to try and be as aggressive as possible, to try and close the distance, try and get in and amongst that phalanx. And I still feel as though they didn't bring enough infantry. They brought a lot of very expensive cav, a lot of archers as well, which initially looked like it was going to pay off, but Who knows? Maybe Gondor was needed. Where was Gondor? Their infantry would have been very useful, particularly their AP spears, the Fountain Guard and the Citadel Guard, exactly the sort of thing which would have given Isengard pause in their cavalry play. Still, these Haven Guard, like, the Haven Guard have been in melee for a long time at this point, and they have just been tanking it out like champs. There are more Axemen on the way now. Really isn't too much left. What's going on here? Ashari Shadows just sort of shooting down these fleeing men. Man, that Arthedain Bannerman, he's like Neo. I mean, he's still taking arrow fire, and he's going to get out of here. I mean, he finally goes down, but man, he tanked a lot of damage there. But the Ashari Shadows are now going to come in. Obviously, the battle is already over. The Ashari Shadows are not needed. Having a look at the percentage of kills, fairly comfortable in the end, actually, for the Forces of Evil. And again, I think that this one definitely comes down to composition more so than skill, because it's a very straightforward fight usually on Lake Evendim, and how you choose to sort of set your line up, how you choose to build your army can often be the most important thing. And I feel as though the Forces of Evil did a better job of that. The Forces of Evil are obviously going to be very good when they go for a very aggressive approach, and that is what they went for here. A lot of good infantry. Less in terms of their archers. There goes the Arthedain General. So I think the Haven Guard are going to be the last ones there. Imrahil is still here after all, fighting to the bitter end alongside his Haven Guard. Again, I mean, it's not like there's a huge amount of the attackers remaining. If we have a look, obviously they've lost a huge amount of their army. 18% of their army's left. You can see the Dunman Hunters obviously victorious from their engagement with the Swan Knights. A few Uruk-hai archers over there as well, but the vast bulk of the attacking army is here. Now, in a very bloody engagement, you can see obviously a very traditional line battle, and as soon as that line was lost, the battle was decided. Mountain Orc Berserkers getting in here as well. Imrahil doing his best to tank out some damage on the front line, but failing. Shanked on there by a Black Uruk of the mountain, or mountains. And King Brand is the last one left alive. Fighting for Dale, and there he goes. An Uruk-hai Berserker running him through with the blunt end of his sword. Not the most pleasant way to go. That is going to be it. I mean, there's still some fighting in there. I'd imagine there's a couple of Haven Guards. There is still the one after all. And that's going to be the end of him.
We are victorious. Our soldiers have fought and died well today.
Yes, indeed. And again, I feel as though composition does come into play here. I mean, with Medieval 2 and Third Age Reforged in particular, it's, you know, in newer games like Warhammer 2, for example, you can often lose the game based on your composition. That's a little bit less true with Reforged. I feel as though you have to really be sort of picking the wrong army in order to just sort of outright be, well, I've got no chance now, there's nothing I can do. But I do feel as though the Kingdoms of Men made their job a lot harder by the army compositions they decided to bring. You know, synergy is an important thing, and I feel as though all of them really went for the same sort of focus. All of them wanted to go for their skirmish, like a more skirmisher heavy focus, when I feel as though that wasn't really necessary. I feel as though what maybe should have happened was a little bit more of a defensive cavalry focus from Dol Amroth, the rest just being infantry. And I feel as though Arthedain in particular needed to bring the Rangers, but bring mostly your infantry, and then leave most of the skirmish to Cardolan's armor-piercing crossbows, and then let Dale handle the archers, because, you know, it's what Dale can do. And unlike Arthedain, I feel as though Arthedain have got more solid infantry choices than Dale, personally. I mean, they are very similar, I suppose, in terms of what they can offer, but with stuff like the Dismounted Knights of Anubis, the Four Nosterrain Knights, in my opinion, are just a stronger pick over the Sword Masters of Karnan because of the armour. I feel as though Arthedain should have gone much more heavy in terms of their infantry prowess. I don't think the Evendim Archers and the Arthedain Marksmen ultimately achieved too much. And you can see obviously here Dol Amroth's army, a lot of it was bound up in their cavalry, which ultimately they couldn't really use as effectively as they would have wanted. Cardolan getting the most kills on the field, not too surprising. Their crossbows were in a really devastating position, raining death down upon Rudawa. But Harad doing very well. I mean, early on, you know, I was a bit critical of wasting that one unit model for the Mumakil, which is a lot of value gone immediately. But when both they and Isengard came forward in force, very well done. And Tangerine, he kept probing with those Warg Riders. You know, the warning signs were there for the Kingdoms of Men. He wanted to get in behind the lines in a more direct fashion with the Wargs. They stopped both of his standard Warg Riders from doing so, but they could not stop the most dangerous unit he had in the Champions of the White Hand, which that was really where the battle became unwinnable for the Kingdoms of Men. So let's have a look. What did the damage for Hunter Wayward? So we got just over 200 kills from the Ferodrum Javelins. When they moved forward, they were actually one of the ones that weren't part of that big blob that got slaughtered by the Cardinal crossbows and Rangers. So when they came forward, a lot of damage with their Javelins, a lot of damage in melee as well with their big war clubs. Pyranodyne Berserkers also doing okay. Animals, Troll Hunters as well. So again, all of the Javelins and Axe Throwers really, that's where Rudar have most of their strength, sort of regardless of what sort of fight it is. Very, very good at dealing damage very quickly. Most of their infantry not doing so great, however, because again, they really faced a literal uphill battle against those Cardinal units, and Hunter Wayward, initially it looked like blobbing up his forces in that way was going to really come back to bite him, but in the end, it proved to be not quite so terminal. So yeah, big thank you to him for sending me this replay. Big thank you to all the players for playing in it as well. Obviously, like I said, Hunter Wayward has sent me quite a few battles, which will certainly tide me over for quite a while. But obviously, I'm always willing to accept more, obviously, especially large-scale battles, because those tend to be the ones that people want to see a little bit more so. And I do have, like I said before, a battle on the Iron Hills coming up, which Rules 1 sent me, which is very, very long. It's 70,000 frames, so I'm not sure sort of how that's going to work, whether it happens in stages or whether it literally is a 70k frames battle, in which case we may be looking at another 2-hour video again, just like the Minas Tirith one. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.